So we're going to get started. So the topic of the discussion today is how does Macys create operational insights from Hadoop? So just a couple of mechanics here. So my presentation is going to run about 30 minutes, 20 to 30 minutes, then we'll have about 10 minutes of Q&A. So before I jump into this, just to give you a little bit background of myself, I've been in the IT industry for about 20 years now. Worked in the traditional BI, EDW type solutions for almost 15 years. A lot of experience in analytics. But over the years, migrated on to like a Hadoop type solution. So today here, I'm going to share some of the experience that we had at Macys. So you could take some of that back to your companies and try and adopt some of those. Is there anyone in the room that doesn't know what Macys does? Yeah, I expected that. So, but still, I wanted to give you a little bit more background on who Macys is. So Macys is a 150-year-old company, so there's tremendous legacy behind the company. It's a huge brand everybody knows. It's one of the premier omni-channel retailers out there. Last year, the company made about $27 billion combined. And we operate about 870 stores across 45 states. And that one is going to sleep. So there's some technical issue going on here. So I'm going to keep going so they can figure this out. We ship our products to over 100 countries out in the world. And we have two major brands, Macys and Bloomingdale's. And we have sub-brands under there that represent both the in-store channels and online channels. We also had a recent acquisition of a beauty company called Blue Mercury. So that company is getting integrated into Macys as a whole. The workforce at Macys, it kind of fluctuates because we are in a seasonal industry. But at the peak, we have about 157,000 employees. This is during the holiday time when we are bringing in a lot of associates to help us with the high influx of customers coming in during holiday time. So that is the high-level background of Macys. Now let's go a little bit into the digital side of Macys. So you all must be very familiar what happened in the last 10 years. There has been an explosion of the digital channels that is impacting every single industry, including retail. So we were right in the center of this. So looking back at last year's business that Macys generated from the digital channels, just during the month of December, we made about $1 billion in business. And this growth had been double-digit growth in the last several years. So it's year over year growing at a double-digit pace. We shipped 17 million online orders just during the month of November and December, which was 25% higher than the previous year. So this tremendous growth. So this growth came from multiple reasons. One is we added new fulfillment capacity, anticipating this kind of growth year over year. So we could process all these orders coming in and ship them at the right time to the customers. And we also invested heavily into our website to make it robust so it can scale to that kind of volume and demand. And also we invested aggressively in the digital marketing channels. And if you think about Macys as a company, the traditional way of marketing, which we call it offline, you may watch ads coming on TV, radio, newspaper, direct mail. Those we call as traditional or offline. But we have a huge presence online where we are marketing through paid search vendors like Google, Yahoo, Bing, and all those search providers. We are in organic search. We are in mobile devices. We are in social platforms. So and this is exploding. And every day there's a new marketing channel that we are considering to go reach our customers because we want to be there where the customers are. So this kind of spurred the growth on the digital side, and we need to get prepared for that. So this is just a quick snapshot of what happened last year. So now let's talk about why are we doing Hadoop at Macys. So you might have heard this story from some of other customers. You might have the same experience, but looking back at the traditional data solutions and data architecture, they were very inflexible. We wanted something that's nimble, that can be flexible, that can accommodate the scale and the variety of data coming at us. We were not able to tap into historical data because traditional database systems, they typically archive the data, put it on tapes, ship it offsite. So that data is just not available for an analysis unless you're ready to pay a huge cost for it. We also ran into a lot of compute capacity limitations. So as analysts and data scientists, they wanted more and more compute capacity to run big analytic jobs. But they were heavily constrained that you could only run certain queries during a certain time of the day. You can only extract so much data. They were pretty much shackled. They could not do their jobs. So that was another major limitation of the typical solutions. And there was significant cost implications. Like solutions, the typical RDBMS solutions out there, if you want to scale to this kind of volume and speed, you're going to be paying a very, very high price for it. So that was another major constraint. And the typical data solutions, they are just not meant for unstructured data sets. So as long as you have a transactional system, as long as it's heavily structured for warehousing or an online solution, they're a perfect fit for that. But if you want to start bringing in some unstructured data, the data structure changes, and the solution needs to evolve for it, the typical data architecture could not accommodate. So those are all the reasons why we considered Hadoop. And we went into Hadoop about 5 years ago. So this is the time when barely anyone knew about Hadoop. Very, very few companies even considered Hadoop because they didn't know what it was and what to do with it. But at Macys, coming from the digital side of Macys, we have a very, very open mind to look out for what is new, how can we benefit from that, and have an open mind. And that's what got us here. So we introduced Hadoop into Macys. So now let's talk a little bit about why do we do BI on Hadoop? And my answer is, why not? I come from the traditional data warehousing BI background. I spent more than a decade doing that. But the benefits of this type of solution is just so obvious. So my immediate reaction is like, why not? And here's some examples of that. So this is one single architecture that can cater to a very comprehensive list of use cases. It's not just meant as a sandbox. It's not just meant for data science. It can answer BI type questions. It could do typical standard reporting, dashboarding type use cases too. But it can span this entire spectrum of use cases. That gives us the flexibility of the solution that you can apply to so many different use cases. And what we have built at Macys is basically an integrated ecosystem. It's not just about the data. But you need to consider the end-to-end use case. How is the data going to come in? How are we going to store? How are we going to organize and manage that data? How are we going to get insights out of the data? What kind of tools are going to interact with this data? What are the different types of users that are going to come in and interact? And we need to build an ecosystem of data, process, and tools all working in tandem, not thinking in isolation. We are able to do analytics, experimentation, and production all in one place. So you don't need too many different systems and segregation to do this job. So you come in with an idea, you want to analyze the data, find an insight, take the insight and go apply it to a business decision, and then measure your decision to see how effective is what you're trying, and then be able to go production scale all within the same solution stack. So that was a huge no-brainer for us. And the last one, but not the least, is the total cost of ownership. It's extremely cost-effective to go into the space. You could scale horizontally and get the performance also scale along with it. Typical data solutions, you cannot get that. You can keep throwing money at it, but you're going to reach a point where you're not getting the proportional benefit out of the solution, but Hadoop solves that. And Hadoop can scale, a big data type solution can scale based on how your investment. The more you scale the solution, the more return on investment you can get. And because you might have heard this from Hortonworks and other vendors, that this type of solution it's built with self-healing, right? So if you have a cluster of Hadoop nodes, and depending on your replication factor, if certain nodes fall off, it's okay. Nothing happens. Ever since we started the cluster, we have never had one downtime that was unexpected. So servers go in and out of the cluster all the time. And the cluster is 100% stable. There's no issue there at all. So that kind of helps us with the total cost of ownership, that we can continue with our maintenance cycle without impacting production cluster at all. All right, so now let's start getting into the topic here. What does it mean to be operational? So the key point here is that you need to be able to move quickly from a testing and experimentation cycle into production. So that is very, very important for us. I'll give you a little bit more details on how we function in that space. The second most important part is the data quality itself. So no matter what solution you're building, if the data quality is not there, you are going to lose the confidence of your audience, whoever it is. So that's so important. So once you get that, the next piece is governance, because the folks are going to come to you and ask you, what kind of governance do you have on top of this data? Who has access to it? And why do they have access? What do they do with this information? So all of that follows that. And then the security itself. So you saw at the keynote about cybersecurity and all of that. This is so important for every single industry right now, because you keep hearing about all these breaches that are happening to major corporations, and you question, like, how did they let this happen? But it happens. So the way we operate security is that we make an assumption that a hacker is already in the network. Now what are you going to do? So if you operate in that kind of mode, you have a heightened sense of urgency to address security. You need to guard the data. You need to take ownership and responsibility of the data and make sure only the right folks have access to the right information, and we are not exposing any customer data unnecessarily. The third bullet point I have here is it says acceptable levels of stability and robustness to meet the SLA. I think the key word here, acceptable level, right? So like, how crazy are you going to get to make something stable and to make it robust? So Hadoop is pretty robust. However, so we just celebrated the 10th year of Hadoop at the keynote. What's important is comparing Hadoop type solution to the traditional RDBMS, right? So you take Oracle, DB2, SQL Server, all those other solutions. They have been out in the market for decades. So these vendors, they have had time to mature their product and make it stable. So they've come a long way. Hadoop is still fairly new. It still has a lot of rough edges to it. That's just the nature of it. But there's tremendous amount of energy going in to make it more stable, make it more robust. So you need to accept that fact that there might be instances where things are not smooth. However, what's important is your goal of, you have greater good that can be solved with the solution that no other solution out there can solve to. So as long as you have that open mind and you're able to benefit from this, a little bit of instability is not that big of a deal. Automation. So automation to the nth degree. So if you look at my team today, we have a really small, highly effective, productive team. A lot of what we produce and publish and support, it has tremendous amount of visibility in the organization. It goes all the way up to the C-level suite. So with that comes the responsibility. And however, being a small organization, we don't have the entire production support framework and all the DevOps and everything that comes with a highly supported type of solution. So we rely a lot on automation. So anything that we produce, we try to automate 100% end-to-end with very, very limited manual intervention. So I think that is very, very important to be truly operational, that you are building this automation process that can self-heal itself, that can monitor performance and delivery and SLA and react to that type of expectation. So automation is also extremely key to this. Now, the blueprint. So I know you guys have been patiently waiting to see, what is the blueprint behind all of this? Like, how does the magic happen? So before I jump into this, I wanted to share a little personal story with you guys. So my 11-year-old daughter, she is going to a summer camp, and she went to this chemistry summer camp last week. So this is something that I do with my kids. When they come home in the evening, I ask them, tell me one thing that you learned new today. And sometimes they say, oh, it's the same boring stuff, there's nothing new. But if that's the case, I go try to find something interesting for them every day, so to keep that curiosity going. So what happened last week was my daughter came home, and I asked her the same question, what did you learn today? And she came back and said, I learned something about how scientists operate. And so she's going to this chemistry summer camp, and every day she's coming back like making slime and all kinds of different materials that she used, different colors. But at some point, her teacher explained her, how do scientists think? What is the process they follow? And she showed me this. This is what we created. There's a starting point, and the scientists have certain observations. So from there, they come up with a hypothesis. And they design an experiment from there. And they try to find what is the law and order behind this kind of experimentation. And they cycle through this. And then they come up with a theory on what's happening, why it's happening. And then they continue the cycle of experimentation. And that's how they learn and come up with new concepts. So this resonated big time with me, because this is how we operate at Macys. We are constantly in the cycle of experimentation, learning, and optimizing and productionalizing, right? So this is how we live. This is part of our DNA, and this is the reason why we are where we are. We started this whole Hadoop journey 5 years ago. We didn't even know if this is going to work for us or not, but this helped us. So my suggestion for you guys is, like, if this is not part of your company's culture, I would highly encourage you to consider this, that you need a really robust experimentation framework. Because if you're not trying something new, you don't know what you're missing. And to be able to go through that cycle, you really need a framework to operate in. So this is how I break down this, right? So you start with a problem statement. So basically you ask yourself this question about what is the issue you're trying to solve, and why is it important to the business? You don't want to be chasing the wrong one. You need to qualify the opportunity, and the way you qualify is you size the impact. What is the impact, potential impact, if you try this new concept? How many number of customers are going to be impacted, and what can or cannot be influenced by you? So if it's something that you cannot influence, it's just a lost cost. So don't invest time in that. And from there, you form your hypothesis, right? What is at the root cause of what you're observing, and what change can improve the ROI of this kind of observation, and what are some of the alternatives? You have to consider the different alternatives. So you You cycle through that. You try to find the predictors. These are all the variables that could influence an outcome or the symptom. And from there, you go find what is all the supporting data that you need to bring in to go through this kind of analysis cycle. So you can form a test. So, okay, you come up with an idea, okay, this is the test I'm going to do. And this is, you need to see how risky that test is going to be. So at Macys, we run hundreds of tests at any point. So if you go to Macys.com site, not all of you will get the same site. So the web pages and the experience that you have could be different. So because we are running all kinds of tests on the website to see what is the most optimal way to present content to our customers. And we are constantly measuring the feedback coming from these. So it could be through a desktop device, it could be through a mobile device. No matter what the experience is, there are hundreds of experiments running at the same time, and we have feelers for all these experiments. This data flows back to the system, so we can measure the effectiveness of our tests and make a decision on where do we go from here. And then as you define these tests, you need to have clear-cut success criteria defined. How are you going to measure success? And the way we have a very, very robust statistical team that pores over this data. So the way they look at the data is more inferential statistics. So they look at significance of the data coming back, and more importantly, they put a context on it. Like it's one thing to just have some KPIs defined and looking at how those KPIs are performed, but you really need to know the context of the analysis. There's a bigger context. What else is happening on the site? What else could influence our test? So you need to be cognizant of the overall context and then make an inference from the output. So that's also very important, not just take one KPI and run off with it. All right, so here is the blueprint. This is like a 10,000-foot view of our solution, right? So on the left side, you see the data domains. So we have customer data, order data, transactions, the clickstream data, marketing data. I just listed a few, and there's so many more. All of that data flows into our Hadoop environment, right? So this becomes not just a storage environment, but also an enrichment environment. So you don't want to just store, you don't want to see Hadoop as a cheap storage solution, but your value is much higher than that, and you don't want to stop there. So from there we go into enrichment layer, like how can we dedupe this data? How can we aggregate this data? How can we blend all kinds of data into one place to make it more useful? So once you have done that part, now you're going into governance. So when you're talking about KPIs, the definitions, the data dictionary, who has access to what, where did the data come from, what's the data lineage there, all of that is important. So you layer on top of that. Then, of course, you need to consider data security. Who has access to what? Do we need to compartmentalize this data so the right folks have access to the right data? And then, so you have the data all in one place. Now, you're going to have all kinds of use cases, right? So you have data scientists coming in with their own tools. It could be SAS, R, modeling tools, H2O, whatever. So they're going to come in asking for, you have this data, I have all these tools, can I connect this and do my job? So that's one major use case. Then you have all the ad hoc analysis folks that they may come in with tools like SAS and R and other tools that they want to plug into the same data ecosystem so they could do their ad hoc analysis and data mining. We were also able to overlay campaign management tools and optimization tools on top of the same data. So here, basically, the idea here is that you're moving the tools close to where the data is, not the other way around. So it's a completely different architecture than the traditional one where data lives in one place, tools are in another place. You're moving data from one place to where the tool lives. Then you run into all the constraints, network issues, tool limitations. There's huge data volume to be moved back and forth. So we try to stay away from that kind of model. We are continuously moving tools close to where the data is. And that's where a solution like Hadoop helps us. And we are also able to do standardized reporting and dashboarding. So we are a big user of Tableau. So we have thousands of users using hundreds of dashboards every single day, all connected to this backend solution. But again, data visualization is something that we got into more than 5 years ago. So this was like early times in data visualization as a concept. But we tried it, and we were able to prove the benefit of why should users visualize the data instead of the standard reporting model that they have seen, like grid-based reporting. So we have tremendous success in adopting this type of tools. And on the right, you see the consumption. So today, and this consumption list is growing every day. So what started with marketing has been branching out to several other parts of the organization: merchandising, supply chain analysis, finance, and just to name a few. And it's a constantly growing user base there. So this could truly be an enterprise analytics platform that can cater to the entire company, not just one group or the other. And it can cater to different types of users, not just data scientists. It could be analysts. It could be senior leadership. So it's a comprehensive solution, and that's how we see it. We don't just look at it from one view, but it's every single use case that we bring on board is diversifying this investment that we have made. So all of that didn't come easy for us. Because when we started this journey 5 years ago, there was no precedence. We couldn't go to people and ask for help. So a lot of it came through organic discovery and figuring things out, falling hard and fighting hard. But what happened over time, like one thing that we kept our focus on is we need to deliver value every step of the way to the business, right? So while doing that over the last several years, we had our growing pains. If you look at our typical projects that we work on, let's say, for example, a BI project, we need to build a dashboard with all these metrics, and these are all the source systems. This is the transformation it has to go through, and this is how frequently it needs to be updated. These are all the end users that are going to consume this. A typical BI use case, we spend about 60 to 70% of time doing data engineering, trying to figure out where is the data, how do we bring it, how do we aggregate this, how do we clean this data, how do we make sure there's quality and consistency with the data. There's significant effort gone into just working with the data. Building the output is the easy part, once you understand exactly how the data part works. The other challenge that we had is long analytic iteration cycles, right? Working with Hadoop type solution, which started more as a batch solution, if you're an analyst, you have a hypothesis, you have the data in the back end, you're starting to launch like really complex queries on the data, trying to understand what the data is telling you. The cycle time is really high because you're launching these batch queries and waiting, and you're just wasting time for the response to come back. So that was one big feedback that we got from our analyst community, that our iterations are slow because of the solution. So you need to do something about it. The other challenge that we had was from collaboration. So we have a really large analyst community that are poring over the data, trying to understand what's happening with the business. There was no easy way for them to collaborate. So you go through a cycle of analysis, you build certain objects or some ideas, and you want to share that with others. But the solution just did not have an answer for that. So every analyst is pretty much independent, doing the same thing again and again, hitting the infrastructure, hitting the data again and again. So there was no easy way to collaborate among themselves. So those are some of the challenges. So when we looked at this last year, we started looking at the different vendors out there, different types of products and tools, and how can some of these tools help us? The one big challenge, I think it's getting addressed, it's going to take some more time, is the vendors that are out there, there's tremendous growth in this industry. A lot of new vendors, new players, startups are coming in, trying to help this ecosystem. I don't think we are there yet. It's going to be a journey, and but as long as you are open to considering new solutions, maybe this is a bridge to get to a more stable state. You have to look at what are the current tools out in the market and how can they solve your problem today and continue to solve, to keep you abreast for another 2-3 years. And then where the products mature, stability comes. So we started looking into a tool that can establish like a semantic layer that sits on top of the data. So when analysts come in, we would have the semantic layer established that sits on top of Hadoop. And it's virtual. We want to move, we want to stay away from making more copies of the data. So we wanted to keep it virtual. And once it's built, it can be shared. So it's the same data object sitting, or virtual data object sitting in your Hadoop environment that different analysts can come and hit. So there's governance, there's consistency, there's data quality. All of that is taken care of. Plus, the benefit is it's virtual. You don't need to duplicate the data. From the previous blueprint side, you saw the ecosystem that we have built. So all these tools are so tightly connected with the data. One thing that we wanted to make sure is when we introduce a new tool, it has to seamlessly integrate with the ecosystem. We don't want to introduce a tool that lives on its own and that needs data for itself. It's proprietary in nature. You need to care and feed it separately outside of this ecosystem. We wanted to be away from that kind of business because we have built this ecosystem, so any change that we introduce, any new tool that we introduce need to seamlessly blend in. So that was another key criteria that we had. And we are right now, we identified one company, and we are in the process of deploying their big data OLAP tool. And we think this tool can help solve us some of these challenges, also taking into consideration some of the expectations that we had from introducing such a tool. But it's still a journey. A lot of these tools are still not fully matured. They're getting better every day, and we are giving them a lot of feedback. So we have very close partnerships with our vendors. And one of my day job is to make sure that the vendors understand that they are in this together with us. So they are very open to get our feedback and factor in that feedback into their product. So every single vendor you saw in that slide, we have that kind of partnership. I think that's very important in this big data space because the overall solution is still maturing. You as a vendor cannot operate in isolation. You need to get this feedback from the customers. That's where the rubber meets the road. And us as customers, we love to give this feedback to them so they can make our lives better. So it's a positive cycle. All right, so now you have the solution. The next challenge that you're going to run into is how do you drive adoption? Because folks come in with a lot of legacy. They come in with certain mindsets. They are not open to adopt new solutions. So even though on one side there's a big hype around Hadoop and big data and all of that stuff, it looks great on your resume. But when you bring that kind of idea into your enterprise, there's a lot of resistance internally because either they're ignoring this exists or they're not ready to adopt this. And you're going to see this when you start implementing and rolling out like operational solutions for your customers. So we spent quite a bit of time last year looking at how do we drive adoption to this. Every project we deliver, we prove value. And that should help us drive the adoption. But there are some key components to driving adoption. So I have put together like a quick checklist here. Right? So this is something that we kind of defined and created. So we kind of separated this into two, center of operations and center of evangelism. So the operation team, they take care of keeping this whole solution up and running and optimize and all of that. The next part is the evangelism. So who are the folks that are going to go out there, explain what the solution can do that the existing solutions cannot do, and then try to onboard groups so that from a business standpoint, you can you can bring all of this in one place, have an end-to-end view of how the enterprise is performing. We are continuing to invest in this. So I talked about data quality. So number one factor is you need to get the confidence in your data quality. So without that, everything falls apart. Doesn't matter what technology you throw at them. This is something that a lot of typical IT organizations fall for this trap. They go find a new tool or a technology, and they're just trying to push the technology to business, right? So it's I don't think that's the right way to approach. You really need to understand, what is the business value, what is business trying to do, and then work backward from there. Now go try to find what is the right technology for it. And as you go through this experimentation cycle, you're constantly proving if this is the right solution and learning from it, and then deploying it in production. And then we also standardize our release cycles, right? So this applies very well to our BI type initiatives where everything is set as standard. So our users know exactly when a release notes comes from this group, they know what to expect. They know who to contact, where to get help. Everything has been standardized, so they know exactly what to expect every single time. The next important piece is socializing and training. If you want to drive adoption, you need to continuously socialize and train new analysts, new end users. So for this, we created our own internal user groups. We run Center of Excellence, and we do like monthly user group meetings, internal, which is open to the whole company. They can come in and share their experience, ask for tips and tricks, share performance ideas. And we also do a lot of one-on-ones with individuals or with specific groups to try and onboard them as much as we can. One thing that we try to stay away is that we did not want to project ourselves as the single solution provider. So we try to empower others, saying, so this is something that you can do it yourselves, so we'll train you how to do it, so we can all succeed together. The last and most important piece that we do is monitoring adoption. So this is both qualitative and quantitative. You don't want to be just counting number of users, number of queries, how much data. So that is, those are just numbers. But what's more important is qualitative measurement of the solution that you're producing and the impact that it's having on your business, and measuring that. That's the most important piece. That's what helps business. They don't care how much data you have. They don't care how many servers you have. They care what has that solution done to the business. So, the qualitative measurement is the most key piece here. So I'm going to try and summarize, right? So these are some of the key success factors, right? So following this is what has made my group very, very successful and come this far. Number one is have laser focus on the business value that you're getting. Don't try to push technology to your business partners. Take the opposite route. Think from your business perspective and see how technology can help. And every step of the way, measure the value and impact to the business and record that and see how you can make it better. Second most important part that has helped us over the years is we kept the process overheads at check. Typical IT organizations, in the name of governance and control, they have overburdened everything. It's just too much paperwork, too much unnecessary steps you have to go through to do something very, very simple. It's not helping the business, but there's a reason why it exists, but you have to be pragmatic about this. Don't just create unnecessary process that your team has to go through. Keep business at the center of everything. You could go through a process for 6 months, but business is hurting. What's the point of establishing all this process and documenting everything and no one actually consumes it? It just becomes a nightmare to keep maintaining. So you created this monster that needs to be maintained over time. That's of no use to anyone. So that is something that we have done over time. Not to say we are reckless and we kind of ignore all kind of documentation, but keep it relevant, keep it useful to everyone, and draw that line and say, more than this, I'm not going to do anything more than that. So make sure you draw the line at the right place. Another thing that we are constantly doing is continuous improvement, operational improvement. you're not going to boil this ocean in one day. It's going to take some time. So put it out there, make sure it meets the business needs, and continuously revisit it and see how you can make it better, how you can make it better for your team, how you can make it better for the business. So sometimes, my team, they constantly hear from me complaining about something. So I'm always looking for errors or mistakes, but it's not a negative view, but my point is, like, we need to be improving every single day. So if you put that kind of view, life is better for everyone. Another thing I touched upon is tolerance to a maturing solution for the greater good. So Hadoop is still maturing. So you might hear from a lot of vendors here that they have the silver bullet, but I don't think so. Every solution is still maturing. That's just the nature of it. And as long as you accept that fact, it'll be much easier for you to adopt this. If you come in with the typical IT mindset that it has to be rock solid for me to even consider, this is not the right solution. It's going to take a long time before it gets there, but this solution offers something that none of the other solutions offer. So keep that bigger picture in mind and keeping going in that direction and make it better over time. Keep it very pragmatic. The last and most important part for why we were very successful over the years is that we kept a very flexible resource model. It's one thing, you have a team and you're trying to train them and get them onboarded. That is important, but if you keep a flexible model where you are able to tap into some of the experts in the market, establish your network. What you are here at the summit, this is the best place to establish your network. Go talk to the Hortonworks folks. Go talk to the vendors. Everyone you can see, talk to them about what they do and what their expertise is. Establish your network. Once you have that, and be open to bring some of these consultants for a short gig and say, I'm trying to do something very unique. I don't know how to do this. Tell me how to do this. Because this is a new industry, a relatively new industry when compared to the others. And finding talent is very hard. So establishing that network is very important to make you successful. All right, so that was the end of it. So thank you for joining today. Do we have time for Q&A? Sure. So we ran out of time for Q&A, but I'll be around if you guys need to ask any further questions.